Hey, I'm John Krasinski, and these are notes on a scene from A Quiet Place. John Krasinski is not the name you would think of as like, can't wait to see a horror movie by that guy. And the reason why is because I wouldn't think that either until I read this script originally by these amazing writers, Beck and Woods, and they had this incredible idea of a family that had to live quietly or else they would die. And to me, this whole movie is about family. It is not a horror movie. I mean, it is a horror movie, but to me, the theme of family and what would you really do for your kids is the reason why I did the movie. So this is one of my favorite scenes because it's a movie about a family that needs to remain quiet. This is such a perfect atmosphere and one of the best scenes to tell the rules of how to remain quiet and what happens if you don't. These Monopoly pieces we thought of for a long time. You can see we kept the same colors. So these reds are still hotels, but they're fluff balls from a craft store. So the kids, because of the mother being such a loving mother, she wants them to feel that they have a normal existence even though they have anything but. And all the pieces are obviously things from her crafts or sewing kit or something like that so that the kids can play but not make noise. We knew that sound would not only be a main character, but it would be the character. It's actually the thing that frames the entire movie together. But more than that, it became about adhering to rules. What sounds literally that the audience hears are too dangerous, which ones aren't. It's impossible to live silently, and we knew that, so we wanted to bring the audience through this idea of living as quietly as possible. This is that old theory of loading a gun at the beginning of the scene to build tension, and this lantern will obviously become a huge part of the scene in that it is the first major noise you hear. As an audience, you've been given this entire field of information of how this family is living and why they're living that way. But the one thing you haven't gotten yet is what happens if they do make a sound. And so one of the first big noises in the movie will be from this lantern. This is a live fire, which, let's be honest, probably not the smartest thing to do around children, but Noah made it clear that he wanted to do it. He wanted to be a part of it and keep it real because he understood what we were trying to do with the movie, that if we cut away to a stunt person or did it in post, it wouldn't feel as real and authentic. This was a last-minute idea I actually had. The noise he was supposed to make was just a noise. The fire aspect of it I thought was so much more interesting because the barn is so warm but also looks like a giant tinderbox and adds more tension. But it was one of those things that when it hit, it was so perfect because my character runs over and puts it out, and it was all live. So this take actually happened completely live on 2 different cameras so that we could capture that feeling of tension. This is like a stunt for our movie. We weren't flying through the sky or doing any of the bigger budget movie stuff, but we were actually, these tiny moments, these tiny stunts actually feel even more tense because they're real, they're believable, you can feel like it's happening to you. We wanted the movie to feel really beautiful and really kind of like a Western. We were looking at movies, obviously the Terrence Malick movies like Days of Heaven and Thin Red Line. Also, we shot on film. And the reason why we shot on film was 2 reasons. One, it plays with light really well. Light is really beautiful in film, and when it's not so high def, you can actually play with how dark the corners are and this mystery and tension. We also wanted to make the audience feel like they were a part of this. So this idea of shooting on a farm was very important to us. When I was doing the rewrite, the idea of farm and isolation was a big deal because if you can't see their way out, then you feel as trapped as the family does too. Set design was huge on this movie, not only because it's so beautiful and our production designer, Jeff Beecroft, did an amazing job, but he and I realized that all the information that you're going to be able to give to the audience, because you don't have words to do it, will be in the sets. For instance, you know, this is all the family photos that we have put up. Again, Emily's character, being all about thriving in a real childhood for these kids, wanted to create a home so that they didn't feel that they were living in a bunker. And so she puts up pictures, she lights candles. Even though this has no utility, she puts blankets to make it feel warm, and that these hay bales that are now couches, she's just trying so desperately for these kids to feel like they're living in a special existence rather than a nightmare, which is what they really are living in. This is an actual old barn from upstate New York in Pauling. I also love this idea that Emily still gardened because it's a quiet activity. And so all these herbs and spices and things are all hers that she grows in the garden next door. All those little details were really important. Millie is actually deaf in real life, and it was non-negotiable for me to cast a deaf actress because the character is deaf, not only for the incredibly layered and more honest performance since she's living through it every day, But also, I needed a guide. I needed someone to walk me through what it was like to be the only deaf person in a hearing family. Do you get frustrated? Do you feel empowered? All these different things. And she was incredibly generous and so amazing to have on set. So what we do in the movie when you're with Millie in her perspective is we actually take sound out. So you'll see that she's wearing a hearing aid throughout the whole movie, and when we see the hearing aid from behind, we start to take sound out and go into her perspective. And where that came from was actually a conversation I had with Millie and her mother. And so this idea that we're in her world and that you actually give the audience the perspective of what it is to be deaf in her world. So you have all these crazy things happening around her with the family, with the creatures and all these other tense moments. And yet when we cut to her perspective like this, we pulled sound out of the movie, and it was so much fun to play around with that. Without dialogue, the biggest fear I had was that without dialogue, we wouldn't be able to have pace and tension, because dialogue's actually the thing you're usually cutting and editing. These kids' performance without dialogue were so unbelievably pure and honest, and so the tension in the room has a lot to do with the looks on their faces. You really believe that these kids are in peril. You really believe that this situation is real. And I owe so much of that to the performances of these kids. We had actually just had our second daughter, 3 weeks before I read the first script. And so I was a wide open vessel of tension, fear, and all the other things that new parents go through. So to me, this idea of family was what made the movie special. And then the scares come hopefully because you really don't want to see anything happen to this family that you love.